Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another inspiring session of Hidne Manche Ladcha. Our first storyteller is a trailblazer, as Nepal first openly trans queer beauty queen and an activist for youth sexual and reproductive health and rights. She had challenged stereotypes and given hope to many who struggle to embrace their identity. Please welcome Miss Angel Lama.
Hello and namaste. I'm Angel Lama, and I pronounce she and her, and I'm currently working as an advocacy officer in Blue Diamond Society. So today I'm going to share with you guys about my childhood and how I grew up and how I am here standing in front of you and what's my story, backstory basically. So as she mentioned, I'm a trans person, a trans woman, and so to talk about my childhood, basically, I grew up in Tamang society, Tamang family, as explained in Jalama itself. So my parents come from Kabri Palanchuk, and as long as I remember, my dad said that he stole a hen and sold it to someone and came to Kathmandu. And my mother has never seen school ever, so I was their first ever child. So I was assigned male at birth, but then I'm currently living as a woman. That's why I'm a trans woman. So being assigned male at birth and being their only son had a lot of expectation upon me to get married and then have a beautiful offsprings and then give them basically granddaughters and grandchild. But then I came out as a trans woman. So to give you a little background in my family, my mother comes from a household where she was the eldest daughter. Sabbanda Tulo Didi hununthyo. So she had around three brothers, younger brothers, and one younger sister. So she was basically a second mom. So therefore, she was never able to get education that she really wanted. And I think for that, I have really deep empathy because my mother is really good at math and she can do so many things. And I tell her every day that if she were to able to have access to education, she would be a prime minister or some kind of minister in Nepal. And my dad, as I've told you earlier, he stole a hen and sold it off and came to Kathmandu to live their Kathmandu dream, I guess. So basically, coming from a family where there was no education, my mother always pressured me to have good education. So that's why she enrolled me into a school where education and the language, the English language itself was very important. And I vividly remember that we used to get punished for speaking Nepali language itself. So that was the school setting that I basically grew up in. So in school, I remember that there were a lot of, I remember that I used to, it was not easy for me to fit in terms of with normal crowd with cis people and everyone. I didn't used to use washroom because I was very uncomfortable sharing same washroom with other men. So therefore, I used to hold my pee till the school was finished. And then after my school was finished, I used to come home and use the restroom. So it was a very traumatic experience for me in school. But then apart from that, I had friends. I have few close friends who were really genuinely very empathetic towards me. And I was my true self with them. And I still talk with few of my friends and they are okay with me being a trans woman. And I think that shouldn't be a question itself, that your friend is a LGBTQ person and whether you accept them or not. A true friend or a person a friend who really knows you and empathize you will see past your gender or your sexuality. So I have few of my close friends who still know me as an angel and respect my pronouns and a person as an angel. So apart from that, I think I also have deep empathy towards the teachers and the whole school system itself, because we as a society have been grown up in a system where we are taught that there are only men and women and there is only blue and pink colors. So therefore, it was very hard for them to navigate and understand a trans woman and how they can react to trans women and how they can accommodate me, you know what I mean? So therefore, it was harder for them. And unconsciously, there was a lot of discrimination and bullying in schools. But then looking back now, as a person who have grown so much, I think it wasn't meant in a malicious way. They didn't, my friends and my teachers, they didn't mean it when it came to them discriminating or bullying me. It was not in a malicious way, but rather unconsciously, because the education system here in Nepal, I think, is better. It's good, could be better, because there isn't any education or acknowledgement about LGBTQ people or different sexuality or gender identity. So therefore, that is also what pushed me to be an SRHR advocate here in Nepal. And the work that I'm doing in Blue Raman Society, it pressurizes, I would say not pressurizes, but works with government in terms of incorporating LGBTQ people in school curriculum. And one of the recently done big achievement, I would say, for me at least, and for queer people at least, would be incorporating LGBTQ people in class 7 curriculum. So that was something that we have done recently through our project, which is right here, right now. And I'm really proud to be part of that achievement, because looking back when I was in class 7, I was not able to understand my own self. And I used to think I was the only one, odd one out in the whole friend group and in the whole school. I used to feel like, oh my God, why is it only happening to me? I used to feel so alone. And I'm glad that other people who are going through the same situation in this generation in class 7 will be able to understand different sexuality and gender identity and come and just understand themselves, you know what I mean? So that would be really amazing. And apart from that, I think for me, it was very, I wouldn't say hard, but then it was very tricky to navigate through my gender identity, because, as I mentioned earlier, my mom and dad never had been to school. So at first, to understand myself, I had a bit of struggle, because, as I mentioned earlier, the education system, how this society has been structured, it's very heteronormative. So therefore, I couldn't access to knowledge about queer people, transgender people, different sexuality, gender identity. So it was very, very tricky for me. So my first encounter with different sexual orientation and gender identity would be Saptahik Patrika. I still remember I read this article about Dinma Raz and Ratma Kumari. So it was basically talking about trans queer people, and it was around Tamil area, basically, about talking about trans people. So I was like so intrigued, because I have never thought that those people never existed. And I was very intrigued, and I read there about Blue Raman Society and how they have been working in terms of LGBTIQ field. And from that, I was able to navigate through Blue Raman Society itself. And then I went there and I was like really shocked, because there was this whole another universe about LGBTIQ people and how they're navigating through this Nepali society, where everyone is telling you that if you are a boy, you have to wear blue. If you are a girl, you have to wear pink. So for me, that was really different, because I was able to come out of that typical generic blue and pink color into this rainbow and splash of colors and people living freely. So I was introduced to Blue Raman Society, and then I met a lot of people who were queer person, trans individual, gay, lesbians, and I was very inspired. And then I started working as an intern there. I started attending programs, and I was able to do various projects through there. And my first project was with Under Save the Children, where I was working with LGBTQ children. And then after that, I started working in Right Right Now project, which I mentioned earlier, about SRHR, Sexual Reproductive Health Rights, and CSC, Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And through that, we're doing so many of amazing work, such as incorporating LGBTQ people in school curriculum, and also various organizing various events such as Gai Jatra. And we recently completed 22nd Gai Jatra Pride Parade. And very amazing thing. And also working with young people. I think as a young person myself, it's really important that we listen and we give spaces and meaningful spaces to young people itself. And through our project, we're able to generate more than 60 young queer people leaders throughout Nepal. So it's not only focused on Kathmandu itself, but then throughout Nepal. So that's something that's really amazing about my project. And I'm really glad that I'm part of it, because as a young person, I think I feel deeply with other young peoples and especially young queer people. And when you talk about specifically trans people, my individual journey in terms of navigating the whole society and then the government structure here in Nepal, I think it's really tricky because I really love Nepal and the government itself. If you see throughout South Asia, Nepal is one of the most progressive in terms of papers and laws and policies, LGBTQ people, in terms of LGBTQ people and queer people. So if you see the constitutions, 12, 18, and 42, it talks about queer people's representation and how it is important that we give social justice and their respecting their identity. But then when it comes down to implementation itself, I think there are so many structural barriers for trans people itself to access government documents such as citizenship, marriage equality, and so many other things that comes after that. But I'm really happy recently through our advocacy, we were able to have same-sex marriage temporarily registering things. So Burama Society board team and other community member filed a writ in Patan High Court, and then Patan High Court gave an interim order to temporarily register same-sex marriages. So that's something that's a big achievement for our community itself. So there are a few things that are really amazing about being a queer person and a trans person here in Nepal. But then, as I've mentioned earlier, there are also structural barriers. Sorry. So when it comes down to government and accessing government papers and document itself, I think what I believe personally is I think there's more awareness that needs to be done to the government people itself in terms of creating an awareness around the whole spectrum of sexuality and gender identities. Because what I believe is people in general see LGBTQ people as one certain entity, while there are various entities in LGBTIQ itself. For example, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex. And we all have several identities. And within that identity also, we have various different identities. Like if you ask me, I'm a queer person, trans woman from Tamang community, and I am from Kabri Palanchok. I migrated to Kathmandu for better opportunities. So there are various things that affects or gives me privilege in terms of government work or anything in general in life. For example, the English language itself, right? I am educated. I had this access to education and I'm able to communicate with you in this language. Whereas there are trans women who don't have access to education, or the education system won't allow them to be in school or colleges, so that they are deprived of this kind of education. And there are still a lot of cases of trans women and queer people being discriminated in school. And unfortunately, there are a lot of cases also where people have committed suicide due to the harsh bullying and discrimination and the environment that they have faced in schools and colleges. But fortunately, things are getting better, if you ask me personally. But then having said that, I completely recognize that outside of Kathmandu, it's completely different scenario. If you see Karnali province, there are still places where there is not enough electricity or not enough basic services such as roadways and other basic services. So imagine being a trans person in those kind of area where you don't have education, electricity, or anything. So it is very hard for a trans person or a queer person living there to even understand themselves that they are a queer person itself, or express themselves freely to other people. Because there are still people, even in Kathmandu, like when you say you're a queer person or a trans woman, they have a certain stereotype in their head, right? And I think they believe that Hijra word itself is an derogatory, something that's bad. You know what I mean? But the term Hijra itself is not a bad term. So when you talk about Hijra itself, in India, during the Mughal Empire, Hijra was a very well-reputed, I'm sorry, what's happening to my English today? So Hijra was a very respectable post where queer people from the community were given that post to look after queens and princesses. But then after the Britishers colonized India, they were basically forced upon giving blessings and then collecting money and making living out of it. So the term hijra itself is not an bad word, but then it's an cultural identity that we must respect and is respected throughout South Asian countries like Pakistan, India, Nepal, and so many places. So there are, various perspectives when it comes to people looking into queer person and having their own general thoughts and judgment around trans people and queer person itself. So given that I've already talked about how different we are within the community, LGBTQ community, and how we have power and privilege in terms of even the language I speak and all the things that I get access to, all the things that I get in life. So it's really important that we understand within LGBTQ also there are various diverse identities in terms of economical condition, geographical areas, and financial stability and knowledge to education and everything. So in general, I think people should be treated, people should have empathy. That's really important because after COVID, I don't know what happened, but I think we are kind of lacking in empathy. We don't have empathy to each other. And we queer person or me as a trans woman is just trying to live my life without doing anything to anyone. You know what I mean? Me living as a trans woman and openly expressing my identity and living my life shouldn't be a problem to anyone because I'm not affecting anything in your life and I'm not changing anything in your life. And me expressing myself shouldn't be any problem to your life. So I think we must all respect and empathize with each other, be it trans person, gay person, lesbian person, and world would be a better place. And I think for me, I personally also believe that there are two kind of people. One is people who are curious and other is people who are ignorant. And it's better to be curious than ignorant because curious people always tend to want to know about what's LGBTQ or other anything, the subject related topic. But then ignorant people just don't want to know about it or they don't care about it. That's completely fine too. But then they don't want to know about it and they don't want to provide the space, the rights and everything that queer people deserve in life. So it's very better to be curious because there are so many things in life that are still need to be discovered by you or any other people. And I think respect is given and taken. If you give me respect, if you give me respect, I'll give you respect. So I think having empathy and having respect for each other, regardless of people's sexual orientation or gender identity, is really important. And what also is important is having empathy because everyone is fighting their own battle. And queer person and trans person in general have to be fighting more than what other people are fighting because our starting line is very different. For example, when it comes to trans people accessing citizenship in Nepal, there are so many barriers. For example, you have to have a medical proof, which itself is a very problematic theme because you want someone to go through a medical surgery in order for them to acquire citizenship of a country. You never ask that to a cis women and cis men. So for a cis man and cis woman, it would be a 5-minute process or a 10 minutes, let's say 1 day process to get in citizenship. But then for a trans woman like me, myself, it's 2 or 3 years long process. So our battle is different and we have to go through a lot in life. So you having basic empathy and respect for us would be a lot to me. And with that, I think the government itself, I really applaud Nepal government, nothing against them, but I think the structure needs to be reformed in terms of creating more awareness. And I think having LGBTQ knowledge ingrained into Lok Seva or the training that's given to Lok Seva people needs to be there. And a lot of just empathy, you know what I mean? Just be curious and empathy. And we are always here to provide you with information that you need in terms of how we have struggled to get government IDs or even basic things in life and how we are judged and everything. And having empathy and having respect for everyone is really important as a human being. And that's it for today. Bye.